Alien nurse said the human injury was horrific human. The medical bay of the Cathari cruiser hummed with soft blue light and the quiet whir of diagnostic drones. At its center lay a human man named Daniel, unconscious and pale, his body wrapped in emergency biofilm. Around him stood 3 alien nurses, their slender forms draped in silver-gray uniforms, their 4-fingered hands moving with calm precision. Their skin shimmered like polished obsidian, and their large eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. The lead nurse, Zira, tilted her head as she studied the human's vitals on her wrist display. "The injury is horrific," Zira said in a low, melodic voice. "His left arm is nearly severed. His ribs are fractured in 3 places and internal bleeding threatens his organs. No Cathari would survive this." Her assistant, Mael, blinked slowly. "Then why does his heart still beat? Why does his brain show signs of dreaming?" Zira did not answer. She reached out and gently brushed a strand of dark hair from Daniel's forehead. It was the first time she had touched a human. His skin felt warm, almost feverish, yet alive in a way that confused her. The Cathari healed quickly, their biology engineered for resilience. Humans, according to fleet records, were fragile, short-lived, and chaotic. Yet here lay one who had survived a plasma explosion that had vaporized 2 of his own crewmates. Daniel groaned softly, his eyelids fluttering. Zira leaned closer. "Do not fight," she whispered. Though she knew he could not understand her language, the universal translator clipped to her collar translated her words into rough English. "You are safe." His eyes opened, brown, clouded with pain, but alert. He tried to speak, but only a dry rasp came out. Zira signaled for water. Mael brought a hydration tube, and Zira held it to Daniel's lips. He drank greedily, then whispered, "Thank you." Those 2 words struck Zira like a pulse wave. Gratitude was rare among species the Cathari encountered. Most either begged or attacked. Not this human. Over the next few days, Zira took personal charge of Daniel's recovery. She monitored his fever, adjusted his pain suppressants, and even learned a few English phrases to ease his confusion. He told her his ship had been scouting a derelict asteroid when pirates ambushed them. He was the only survivor because he'd been repairing an outer hull panel when the attack began. "You hid in vacuum?" Mael asked one evening, incredulous. "Not hid," Daniel corrected weakly. "I sealed the breach with my suit and clung to the hull until your patrol found me." Zira watched him as he spoke. There was no pride in his voice, only quiet exhaustion. She found herself admiring his will. It made no sense. Humans were supposed to be primitive, yet this one had outlasted trained warriors. One night, alarms blared through the ship. Red lights flashed. Zira rushed to the command deck and found the captain speaking with Fleet Command. A distress signal had come from a nearby human colony, attacked by the same pirate faction. Dozens were injured. The Cathari had strict non-intervention protocols regarding non-allied species. "We cannot help them," the captain said firmly. Zira stepped forward. "Captain, this human, Daniel, he risked his life to save his crew. Now his people suffer. If we do nothing, it contradicts the oath we took as healers." The captain stared at her. "You speak for a species we barely understand." "I speak for life," Zira replied. After a tense silence, the captain relented. "Prepare the med bay for mass triage. Dispatch 2 shuttles." Zira returned to Daniel's side. He was sitting up now, his arm in a region cast. "What's happening?" he asked. "Your colony is under attack," she said. "We are going to help." His eyes widened. "You're helping us." "Why?" "Because you showed us that humans are not what we believed." The journey to the colony took 6 hours. During that time, Daniel insisted on helping. Though weak, he knew the colony's layout, its medical stores, and where children were usually kept during drills. Zira listened carefully, updating the rescue plan with his input. When they arrived, smoke rose from the settlement. Buildings were scorched, and the air smelled of burnt metal and fear. Cathari medics moved swiftly, treating burns, fractures, and shock. Zira and Daniel worked side by side. She healed with nanites and sonic tools. He comforted with words and steady hands. At one point, a young girl no older than 6 clung to Daniel's leg, sobbing. Her parents were missing. Zira knelt beside her, unsure what to do. Daniel placed a hand on Zira's shoulder. "Just stay close," he said. "She needs to know someone cares." Zira nodded. She sat quietly beside the girl, humming a soft Cathari lullaby. Slowly, the child's tears slowed. By dawn, the injured were stabilized and the pirates had fled. The colony leader, a woman named Lisa, thanked the Cathari with tears in her eyes. "We never expected help from anyone," she said. Zira looked at Daniel, who stood nearby watching the sunrise. We did not expect to give it, she replied. Back on the cruiser, Daniel's recovery accelerated. His arm regenerated fully thanks to Cathari biotech. Before he was to be transferred to a human vessel, he sought out Zira in the observation lounge. Stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass. I owe you my life, he said. And I owe you a new understanding, she answered. They stood in silence for a while. Then Daniel asked, Will your people change their view of humans now? Zira considered this. Change begins with one. I was one. You were one. Perhaps that is enough. As Daniel boarded the human shuttle, he turned and gave a small salute. Zira returned it, not with military formality, but with a gentle press of her palm to her chest, the Cathari gesture of deep respect. Weeks later, aboard a new diplomatic vessel, Zira reviewed a proposal. It was titled First Contact Medical Alliance, Human Cathari Cooperation. She added her signature without hesitation. Far away, on Earth, Daniel stood before a Senate committee, advocating for peaceful outreach to the Cathari. They saved us when they didn't have to, he said. That's not the act of monsters, that's the act of neighbors. Neither knew if their efforts would succeed, but both knew that one act of compassion had sparked something rare in the cold expanse of space. Hope. And sometimes, hope was the most powerful technology of all. Years had passed since the Alliance began, and Orion's Rest was no longer just a station. It had become a home. New wings stretched into the void, built by human hands and Cathari design. Gardens bloomed with hybrid flora, their petals shimmering in hues no single world could produce. Children born on the station spoke both English and Cathari tongue, their laughter echoing through corridors once filled with suspicion. At the center of it all remained Daniel and Zira. Older now, their faces marked by time, but their purpose unchanged. Yet peace, even when rooted deep, can be shaken by a single whisper. It began with a dream, not Daniel's but Zira's. She dreamed of a dying star, its light swallowed by a silent void. In the dream she heard a voice, not human, not Cathari, but ancient, weary and full of sorrow. It said only 3 words, "They are coming." She woke trembling, her biorhythm unstable. Cathari rarely dreamed. When they did, it was often a signal from their genetic memory, a warning encoded in their bloodline. She told no one at first, not even Daniel. Instead, she accessed the deep archives, searching for records of cosmic anomalies, extinct species, or forgotten wars. What she found chilled her. Buried in fragmented data from 1,000 cycles ago was mention of the Void Weavers, beings not of flesh, but of collapsed thought, born in the spaces between galaxies. They did not conquer. They consumed. Not planets, not ships, but connection itself. They fed on unity, on trust, on love. Where they passed, civilizations did not fall. They simply forgot how to care for one another. Families turned silent. Allies became strangers. Hope turned to dust. The records called it the Great Unraveling, and it had happened before. Zira brought her findings to Daniel in the quiet hours before dawn. He listened without interrupting, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup of herbal tea, a Cathari blend that helped him sleep. When she finished, he set the cup down slowly. "You think they're real? I think something is coming," she said, "and it does not fight with weapons. It fights by making us forget why we stand together." Days later, the first signs appeared, not in space, but within. A human medic snapped at a Cathari nurse over a minor protocol error, something that would have been laughed off months ago. A joint research team disbanded after accusations of data theft. Though no proof existed, even children began choosing sides in games, drawing lines between species that had never been there before. Daniel noticed it in himself too. One morning, he caught himself doubting Zira's judgment during a triage decision. The thought shocked him. He had never questioned her. Never. Yet the seed of mistrust had been planted, small and quiet. That's how it works, Zira realized. It does not attack, it whispers. They called an emergency council, but the meeting dissolved into argument. Old grievances resurfaced. Humans accused Cathari of hoarding medical tech. Cathari elders claimed humans were too emotional, too unstable for deep alliance. Daniel and Zira watched in horror as the room fractured. Afterward, alone in the observation lounge, Daniel stared at the stars. "What do we do when the enemy is inside us?" "We remember," Zira said. "How?" "By telling stories. by holding on to what is real. She took his hand and led him to the station's memory vault, a chamber where recordings of the Alliance's earliest days were stored. They played the footage of Daniel's rescue, his weak voice saying thank you. They watched Lisa weeping as Cathari medics saved her daughter. They listened to Varek's first public speech where he admitted his shame and asked for a chance to heal. "This is real," Zyra said. "Not the doubt. Not the fear. This." They began a quiet campaign, not with speeches but with presence. Daniel visited human quarters, sharing meals, listening to worries without judgment. Zyra walked the Cathari halls singing old lullabies to restless young ones, reminding them of their oath to heal all life. They also reached out to others who still remembered. Lyra, now head of youth integration, organized mixed species art projects. Varek started a dialogue circle, where former enemies sat together and spoke honestly about their fears. Maria, Daniel's sister, returned to the station and opened a clinic that treated patients regardless of origin, using both human and Cathari methods. Slowly, the fog began to lift. But the Void Weavers were not done. One night, the station's core systems flickered. Lights dimmed. Gravity fluctuated. Then every screen across Orion's Rest lit up with the same image. A swirling black spiral, silent and endless. No sound, no message. Just the spiral. Panic spread. Some believed it was a weapon. Others thought it was a god. Many simply froze, overwhelmed by a sudden, crushing loneliness. In the chaos, Daniel found Zyra in the med bay, holding a crying human child whose parents had vanished in the confusion. She looked up, her eyes dim. "It is here," she said. "What do we do?" "We do what we have always done," she replied. "We care." They activated the station's oldest protocol, emergency unity. All non-essential systems shut down. Every resident human or Cathari was guided to communal halls. No one was left alone. In each hall, a pair, one human, one Cathari, led a simple ritual, sharing a memory of kindness. In Hall 7, Daniel spoke of the first time Zyra gave him water. In Hall 3, a Cathari elder told of a human boy who shared his last ration during a supply delay. In Hall 12, a young girl sang a song her grandmother taught her, half in English, half in Cathari. As the story spread, the spiral on the screens began to fade, not because it was defeated, but because it had nothing to feed on. Where there was connection, it could not stay. By morning, the systems returned. The spiral was gone. No damage was found. Yet everyone knew something had happened, something deep and unseen. In the days that followed, the Alliance did not return to what it was. It became stronger, not because the threat was gone, but because they had faced it together and chosen each other again. Daniel and Zyra stood once more on the observation deck, watching a new transport arrive, this one carrying delegates from a third species, drawn by rumors of a place where enemies became friends. "Do you think they'll understand?" Daniel asked. "They will learn," Zyra said. "Just as we did." He smiled. "Remember when you said my injury was horrific?" "I did. And you saved me anyway." She looked at him, her eyes glowing warm gold. "I did not save you. We saved each other, and that, more than any weapon or shield, was what would protect them from the dark. For in the end, the universe was vast and full of dangers, but it was also full of hands reaching out in the night, voices saying thank you, and hearts that chose to believe in one another. Even when the stars went silent, the Void Weavers would return. They always did, but so would the light. Because as long as even two beings stood together and said, "We are not alone," the darkness could never win. And on Orion's Rest, that promise lived in every breath, every touch, every shared sunrise over the endless sea of stars. The peace between humans and Cathari held for nearly 2 years. Orion's Rest became a beacon of cooperation, its halls filled with shared research, joint patrols, and even cultural exchanges. Children from both species played together in zero-gravity gardens, and medics trained side by side in emergency response drills. Zyra and Daniel remained at the heart of it all, not as leaders, but as quiet examples of what trust could build. But peace is fragile when the universe is vast and not all voices are heard. Far beyond the Alliance zone, in the uncharted rim where law did not reach, a new threat stirred. It called itself the Purifiers, a coalition of fringe factions from multiple species who believed that interspecies mingling was an abomination. They saw the human Cathari alliance not as progress but as corruption. Their message spread through encrypted channels, purity through separation. Survival through isolation. Their first strike was subtle. A supply freighter carrying Cathari medical nanites to a human refugee camp vanished. No distress call. No debris, just silence. Then came a second disappearance. This time a human science vessel studying atmospheric healing on a dying world. Both ships had one thing in common. They flew under the Alliance banner. Station Command dismissed it as piracy. Daniel did not. He remembered the cold precision of the true Earth attackers. This felt different, calculated, patient, and far more dangerous, Zira agreed. She had begun receiving strange signals on old Cathari emergency bands. Whispers in broken dialects, quoting ancient texts about genetic purity. Someone was watching them, someone who knew their weaknesses. One night, as Daniel reviewed star charts in his quarters, Zira entered without knocking. Her usual calm was gone. Her eyes pulsed with a deep violet hue, a sign of high stress in her species. "They took Lyra," she said. Lyra was a young Cathari medic, barely past her first cycle of service. She had been assigned to a mobile clinic on the Outer Rim, helping human settlers recover from a solar flare disaster. Her last transmission showed her smiling, holding a human child's hand. Now she was gone. Daniel stood. "We find her how the Rim is lawless. Even our scouts avoid it." "Then we go where no scout dares," Daniel said. They did not ask permission. They stole a small reconnaissance skiff, fast, unmarked, and equipped with cloaking tech. Zira piloted while Daniel monitored sensor ghosts and encrypted chatter. For 3 days they flew through dead zones, following faint energy trails left by Lyra's medpack beacon. On the 4th day, they found it, a derelict mining station orbiting a blackened moon. The place was dark, but thermal scans showed life signs, dozens of them. And one matched Lyra's biosignature. They docked silently. Inside, the air was stale and cold. Walls were scrawled with symbols. A twisted version of the Alliance emblem crossed out with red phosphor paint. They moved carefully, weapons drawn but not raised. Daniel carried a stun pulse rifle. Zira wore a neural disruptor on her wrist. Deep in the station's core, they found a chamber. Lyra hung suspended in a containment field, pale and weak. Around her stood figures in ragged cloaks, some human, some Cathari, others unrecognizable. At the center stood a tall Cathari male, his skin etched with ritual scars, his eyes burning with fanatic light. "You should not have come," he said, his voice distorted by a vocal modulator. "Who are you?" Zira demanded. "I am Varek, last true son of the old blood. We were pure once, strong. Then we opened our arms to soft-skinned, short-lived creatures who bleed and break at a touch. You shame our ancestors by healing them." "They are not weak," Zira said. "They endure, they care. They choose kindness even when it costs them." Varek laughed. "Kindness is weakness dressed in pretty words. Look at her." He gestured to Lyra. "You taught her to treat humans like equals. Now she is tainted. We will cleanse her, or break her. Either way, the lesson will spread." Daniel stepped forward. "Let her go." "This ends now." Varek raised a hand. Instantly, cloaked figures moved, surrounding them. But Daniel had expected this. Before leaving Orion's Rest, he had planted a tracker on Zira's belt, one linked to station security. Help was coming. They just had to buy time. Zira spoke then, not in anger but in sorrow. "Varek, I knew your sister. She died in the border wars. I held her as she passed. She whispered one thing before she left. Do not let hate be my legacy." Varek froze. His hand trembled. For a moment, the fanaticism in his eyes flickered, replaced by something raw and human. Grief. But then he hardened again. "Lies. You twist memory to serve your cause." "No," Zira said softly. "I honor it." In that pause, Lyra stirred. With the last of her strength, she overloaded her medpack. A pulse of light erupted, shorting the containment field. She dropped to the floor, gasping. Daniel lunged, grabbing her arm and pulling her behind him. Chaos erupted. The cloaked figures charged. Zira activated her disruptor, sending waves of calm energy that stunned but did not kill. Daniel fired precise pulses, disabling weapons without harming limbs. They fought not to destroy but to protect. Then sirens wailed. Station security ships dropped out of warp. Surrounding the station, Varek snarled, realizing he was trapped. He turned to flee, but Zira called out, "Varek, stop. You do not have to die for this lie." He turned, eyes wild. "What do you offer me?" "Prison." "Shame." "I offer you healing," she said. Your pain is real. But it does not have to poison your soul. For a long moment he stood still. Then slowly he lowered his weapon. The other purifiers surrendered without further fight. Back on Orion's Rest, Lyra recovered quickly. Varric was placed in a therapeutic detention unit. Not a cell, but a space designed for reflection and rehabilitation. Cathari elders and human counselors worked with him daily. He spoke little at first, but over time the walls cracked. He admitted he had lost everything: family, home, purpose, and the purifiers gave him a reason to rage. Now he had to learn how to hope. The Alliance Council met in emergency session. Some demanded harsh punishment. Others called for the Alliance to close its borders. But Daniel and Zira stood before them together. "If we respond with fear, we become what they accuse us of being," Daniel said. "If we respond with more walls, we prove their point, that we cannot truly share a future." Zira added, "Healing is not just for bodies. It is for minds, for societies. If we abandon compassion now, we lose the very thing that makes us stronger than our enemies." The Council listened. Instead of war, they launched the Unity Initiative, a program to reach out to isolated communities, address fears, and offer aid without condition. Former Purifier members who renounced violence were given paths to rejoin society. Varric, after 6 months, began volunteering in youth outreach, speaking about loss and the danger of turning pain into poison. Life on Orion's Rest changed again, not with grand declarations, but with small acts. A human engineer taught Cathari children how to build solar harvesters. A Cathari poet held readings that humans translated into song. Daniel and Zira continued their work, quieter now, but deeper. One evening, as they walked the outer ring overlooking the nebula belt, Daniel stopped. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a smooth stone from Earth worn by ocean waves. He pressed it into Zira's hand. "My grandmother gave this to me. She said it carried the memory of tides, of things that return no matter how far they drift." Zira closed her fingers around it. "It is warm like us," he said. She looked at him, her eyes glowing soft gold, the color of trust, of home. For the first time she used a human phrase she had once found strange but now understood completely. "I'm glad you're here." And he was. Not just on the station, not just in this moment, but in this shared life they had built from a single act of mercy. In a cold medical bay, far away, new signals flickered on the edge of known space. Other species watched. Some with fear, some with curiosity, a few with hope. And on Orion's Rest, a human and a Cathari stood together not as symbols, but as friends. Proof that even in a universe of endless difference, two hearts could beat in the same rhythm. The story was not over, but it was no longer just about survival. It was about belonging. The years settled like starlight on Orion's Rest, gentle, constant, and full of quiet purpose. Daniel's hair had turned silver at the temples, and Zira's obsidian skin now carried fine lines around her eyes. Marks of laughter more than age. They no longer needed to prove the alliance worked. It simply was. New generations grew up knowing no other way. Human children played strategy games with Cathari youths, and Cathari apprentices learned human folk songs to calm frightened patients. The station had become a living testament to what could grow when fear was replaced with curiosity. But even the strongest roots can be tested by storms no one sees coming. It started with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, unnatural kind. Deep space probes on the far edge of Alliance territory stopped sending data. Not because they were destroyed, there was no explosion, no debris, but because they simply went quiet, as if their very reason to speak had vanished. Then came the dreams again. Not just Azira's this time, but others too. Humans reported nightmares of empty cities where no one answered their calls. Cathari spoke of visions where their healing songs turned to dust in their throats. Daniel noticed it first in the children. They grew quieter, less likely to share toys or stories. A human boy named Leo, who once taught Cathari twins how to skip stones in the hydro garden pond, now sat alone, staring at his hands as if they no longer belonged to him. "Something is wrong," Daniel told Zira one evening as they walked the outer ring. "It's not anger this time. It's absence," Zira nodded. The Void Weavers did not return with force. They returned with emptiness. And emptiness was harder to fight. This time there was no spiral on the screens, no dramatic warning. The enemy had learned. It seeped in slowly like cold through a cracked hull, stealing not trust but meaning. Why help if no one thanks you? Why speak if no one listens? Why love if it all ends the same? Even the Alliance Council began to drift. Meetings grew short. Decisions were delayed. Cooperation became routine, not heartfelt. Daniel watched as a human engineer and a Cathari architect argued over a ventilation design, not with passion, but with dull indifference. Neither cared enough to truly disagree. That frightened him more than shouting ever could. "We are forgetting why we began," Zira said softly one night in their shared quarters. "Not the facts. The feeling." Daniel sat by the window watching a cargo ship dock in the distance. "Remember when I first woke up on your ship? I was broken, terrified. But you looked at me like I mattered, because you did," she said. "Do I still?" She turned to him, her eyes glowing faint amber, the color of remembrance always. But the feeling was fading across the station. People went through the motions of unity without its soul. Gardens were tended, but no one stopped to smell the flowers. Med bays healed bodies, but no one held a hand during recovery. The Alliance was alive, but it was not living. Then came the message. It arrived not through official channels, but through an old emergency frequency, one used only in the earliest days of contact. The voice was weak, distorted, but unmistakable. It was Lisa, the colony leader from the border world they had saved so long ago. "Orion's Rest. If you can hear this, we need you." Daniel and Zyra exchanged a look. That colony had thrived for years, a symbol of human resilience. What could have happened? They took a shuttle alone against protocol. When they arrived, the settlement was intact. Buildings stood, power flowed, crops grew. But the streets were empty. No children ran. No voices called from windows. They found Lisa in the medical center, sitting beside a row of beds filled with people who were not sick, not injured, but simply still, eyes open, breath shallow, unmoving. "They stopped caring," Lisa whispered, tears tracing her cheeks, one by one. "They said nothing matters, so they stopped doing anything, eating, speaking, hoping." Daniel knelt beside a young man he once knew, a boy who had fixed his boot during the pirate attack. Now he lay staring at the ceiling, unblinking. Zira placed a hand on his forehead. His biosigns were stable. But his will? It was gone. This is the Void Weaver's true weapon, she realized. Not chaos. Not hate. Surrender. They tried everything. Daniel spoke of old adventures, of shared meals, of promises kept. Zira sang the lullaby she once used for the orphaned girl. Nothing reached them. The people had not been broken. They had simply let go. On the third day, as Daniel sat exhausted in the colony square, a small hand touched his. He looked down. It was a girl, no older than 5, clutching a stuffed toy made of scrap fabric. She did not speak. She just stood there watching him with wide, uncertain eyes. He smiled gently. "Hey there." She did not smile back, but she did not leave. Zira watched from the doorway. That child still feels something. Fear, curiosity. Even that is a thread, an idea formed. Fragile, desperate, but real. They could not fight emptiness with grand gestures. They had to rebuild meaning one small moment at a time. They started with the girl. Daniel showed her how to tie a knot. Zira taught her the name of a flower in Cathari. Slowly, others gathered, not to join but to watch. And watching was a beginning. Back on Orion's Rest, Daniel and Zira changed their approach. No more councils. No more speeches. They began doing small things, publicly, consistently. Daniel fixed a broken bench in the main plaza and sat on it, inviting others to join. Zyra started leaving handwritten notes in common areas. Simple messages like "you are seen" or "your work matters." At first, people ignored them. Then someone left a note in return. "Thank you." They encouraged others to do the same. A chef began placing a single wildflower on each meal tray. A Cathari technician repaired a child's toy without being asked. A human teacher started each class by asking, "What made you smile today?" It was not fast. It was not loud. But it was real. The Void Weavers could not feed on this, because this was not about belief in a grand cause. It was about belief in each other, one act at a time. Months passed. The colony on the border world slowly woke. People began tending gardens again, not because they had to, but because they remembered the joy of green things growing. On Orion's Rest, laughter returned to the halls, not forced, but natural, rising from shared moments. One evening, Daniel and Zyra stood in the hydro garden, watching Leo teach the Cathari twins how to braid reeds into bracelets. The boy laughed as one twin dropped his strand and the other teased him in broken English. "It's coming back," Daniel said. "Not coming back." Zira corrected softly, being rebuilt. There is a difference. He nodded. We are not the same people we were. No, we are wiser. They walked in silence for a while. Then Daniel stopped. What if they come again? They will, Zira said. And we will be ready, not with shields, but with stories, with kindness, with stubborn, quiet love. He took her hand, and as long as we remember why we started, we'll never truly be empty. Above them, the station lights glowed steady against the endless dark. Ships came and went, carrying not just supplies but hope. New species arrived, drawn not by treaties but by the simple truth that here, no one was left behind. Daniel and Zira knew their time would not last forever. One day others would carry the torch. But for now they stood together, two beings from different worlds who had chosen to see the light in each other, and in doing so, had lit a flame that even the deepest void could not swallow. And in the quiet hum of the station, in the laughter of children, in the gentle touch of a hand offered without reason, the universe whispered back, "This is how peace lives. Not in the absence of darkness, but in the courage to keep lighting candles one by one, forever." Months passed since the rescue on the border colony, and the fragile bridge between humans and Cathari began to strengthen. Zira was no longer just a nurse on a patrol cruiser. She had been reassigned to the newly formed Interspecies Medical Liaison Unit, stationed aboard the neutral space station Orion's Rest. The station hung in the quiet void between human and Cathari territories, a place built for dialogue, not war. Its corridors buzzed with dozens of species, but none watched each other as closely as the humans and the Cathari. Daniel had returned to Earth, but he did not stay long. Within weeks, he volunteered for the first human delegation to Orion's Rest. His name carried weight now, not as a soldier but as a survivor who had been shown mercy by an alien people. When he stepped off the transport shuttle, his eyes scanned the crowd until they found her. Zira stood near the docking bay entrance, her obsidian skin catching the station's soft amber light. She wore no uniform this time, only a simple gray tunic marked with the new Alliance symbol, a circle with two interlocking hands, one human, one Cathari. "You came," she said through her translator, though her voice held no surprise. "I told you I would," Daniel replied. They walked together through the station's main concourse. Humans and Cathari still kept their distance, eyeing each other with caution. But Daniel and Zira moved side by side without hesitation. Their presence alone sent a quiet message. Trust was possible. Their work began immediately. A joint medical trial was scheduled, testing whether Cathari regenerative nanites could safely integrate with human biology long-term. Daniel volunteered to be the first human test subject. Doctors warned him of risks: immune rejection, neural feedback, even cellular collapse. He agreed without flinching. Zira prepared the injection herself. In the sterile white chamber, she held the vial up to the light. Tiny silver particles swirled inside like living stardust. "This could change everything," she said. "Or end it," Daniel added with a small smile. She injected the nanites into his forearm. For 3 days he lay in observation, feverish and restless. Zira stayed by his side the entire time, monitoring his vitals, adjusting the dosage, speaking softly when his dreams turned dark. On the 4th morning, he sat up, clear-eyed and calm. The scan showed the nanites had bonded perfectly with his cells. His old scar from the pirate attack had vanished. His bone density had increased. His heart beat stronger than ever. "It worked," Zira whispered. "Not just worked," Daniel said. "It healed me in ways I didn't know I needed." News of the success spread fast. Within a week, 5 more human volunteers joined the program. Cathari scientists, once skeptical, began sharing data openly. The alliance was no longer just a hope. It was becoming real. But not everyone wanted peace. One evening, as Daniel and Zira reviewed patient files in a quiet corner of the med bay, an alarm sounded. Not a medical alert, but a security breach. A human extremist group calling themselves True Earth had infiltrated the station. They believed cooperation with aliens was betrayal. Their goal was simple: destroy the alliance before it grew. Security footage showed 3 humans planting devices near the Cathari habitat wing. Daniel recognized one of them, a former comrade from his old fleet, a man named Carter who had lost his family in an unrelated alien skirmish years ago. Grief had twisted him into something bitter. "We have to stop them," Daniel said, already moving. Zira followed without question. They reached the habitat wing just as the first device activated. A low hum filled the air. followed by a pulse of electromagnetic energy that knocked out lights and life support. Cathari began collapsing. Unlike humans, their biology relied on stable energy fields to regulate internal functions. Daniel sprinted toward the device while Zira helped her people to safety. He had no tools, no training in bomb disposal, but he remembered his days as a hull technician. He spotted the power core, exposed and pulsing red. Without thinking, he ripped off his jacket and wrapped it around his hand, then yanked the core free. Sparks flew, burning his skin, but the pulse stopped. The second device was deeper inside. Carter stood guard, a plasma pistol in hand. Daniel, Carter, you don't have to do this. They're not like us. Carter spat. They'll use us, replace us. You've seen their tech. They're centuries ahead. Why would they help unless they wanted something? Because sometimes people help just because it's right, Daniel said. I was dying in space. Zira didn't have to save me, but she did. Carter's hand trembled. My daughter died because of aliens, and mine lived because of one, Daniel replied gently. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Carter lowered his weapon. The second device was disarmed before it could trigger. In the aftermath, Carter was taken into custody, but his words lingered. Fear ran deep on both sides. Zira knew that one act of kindness would not erase generations of suspicion, yet she also knew that one act of violence could undo everything. She proposed something bold, a shared healing ceremony. Not religious, not political, just medical. Cathari and humans would treat each other's wounded together, in full view of the station. No translators, no protocols, just hands working side by side. The station council agreed. On the day of the ceremony, dozens gathered in the central med hall. A human child with a broken leg was brought in. A Cathari elder with failing lung filters followed. Zira knelt beside the child, her 4 fingers gentle as she set the bone. Daniel assisted a young Cathari medic as they calibrated the elder's filters. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Afterward, a human reporter asked Zira why she did it. She looked at Daniel, then at the crowd. Because healing is not about species. It is about seeing pain and choosing to ease it. Weeks turned into months. The alliance grew. Joint clinics opened on neutral moons. Cathari nanites were adapted for human use in emergency fields. Human psychologists began working with Cathari to understand emotional trauma, a concept the Cathari had long ignored, believing logic alone could solve all wounds. Daniel and Zira became more than colleagues. They shared meals in silence, walked the observation decks under artificial stars, and sometimes simply sat together, watching ships come and go. They never spoke of love. Such words felt too small for what they shared. But others noticed. The way Zira's glow brightened when Daniel entered a room. The way Daniel always saved the last piece of fruit for her. One day, a message arrived from Earth. Daniel's sister, Maria, was critically ill with a rare neural degeneration. Human medicine had no cure. The doctors gave her weeks to live. Daniel's face went pale. Zira saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear she had seen when he first woke on her ship. We will help her, Zira said, but the treatment is experimental. Even for us, I don't care. Please. Zira contacted the Cathari High Council. They refused at first. Sharing advanced neural tech with outsiders violated core laws. But Zira did not beg. She presented data. She showed how Maria's condition mirrored a Cathari ailment once thought incurable, until compassion led to breakthroughs. After 3 days of debate, the council relented. One treatment. Under strict observation, Maria was brought to Orion's rest. Weak, barely able to speak, she clung to Daniel's hand. Zira administered the neural nanites herself. For 2 days, Maria lay still. On the third, she opened her eyes and whispered Daniel's childhood nickname, Danny. Tears rolled down his face. Thank you, he said to Zira. She shook her head. Thank your sister. Her courage gave us a chance to prove that healing knows no borders. Maria recovered fully. Before returning to Earth, she hugged Zira tightly. You're family now, she said. As the shuttle lifted off, Zira stood on the observation deck, Daniel beside her. Below, the station hummed with life. Human children playing with Cathari youths, medics sharing notes, engineers solving problems together. It was not perfect. Misunderstandings still happened. Old fears still whispered in the dark. But something new was growing. You think this will last? Daniel asked. Zira looked at him. As long as there are people like you and like me who choose to see the person before the species, yes. He smiled. Then we're in good hands. And for the first time in her life, Zira felt not just like a healer, but like a part of something greater. A future built not on weapons or treaties, but on a simple truth spoken by a dying man in a medical bay long ago. Thank you.